Hey guys, if you're here because you think I can discourage you from buying a Q3 as I prevented you from buying an M11 with my last video, I must disappoint you here. The Leica Q3 has become a fantastic camera. Let's start by saying that I really enjoyed my time with the Leica Q3. Although I'm not a fan of 28mm, as I lean more towards the 35mm focal length, I still had a genuine desire to use this camera every day. Many things are important in a camera: hardware, price, build, quality or size. But the most crucial thing is that the camera must be fun to use. And this camera is genuinely enjoyable, at least for me. However, I also know that I didn't buy it. There are enough YouTubers who have the camera for a week and can only provide limited insights into the nitty-gritty details of this camera. I've taken quite a lot of photos with it. I used it in a fashion shoot, a wedding, architecture and of course in between as an everyday carry and street photography camera. I would have liked to take more pictures with it in the streets, but the German summer this year somewhat hindered me. Nevertheless, I can give you a relatively precise idea of what it's worth and what's not. And this camera stands and falls with the lens mounted on it. So let's start it here. The lens is the main star of the camera and the primary reason why one would buy this camera in the first place. This lens is excessively good to the extent that it doesn't require any improvements for the new sensor. Continuing the trend since the first Q. I can personally confirm that it remains incredibly sharp even at f1.7. I would like to compare it with the 28 Summicron, but I don't have a spare 4,550 euro lying around. Therefore, you will have to settle for a comparison with the Hollyland 35mm Nocton 1.5. The images were taken with the Q at 60 megapixels and a 35mm crop, resulting in 40 megapixels. The Leica M11 images were taken at 35mm with 36 megapixels to facilitate a better comparison. It's worth noting that the Q3 corrects JPEG files for lens issues unlike the M11. The result? The Q3 performs exceptionally well. You will hardly find a better 28mm on the market. The integration of manual focus is also a real highlight. Press the small button on the focus tab and you will get a genuine manual lens. Fantastic engineering, perfect for zone focusing in street photography. The build quality is excellent, just listen. There is also a macro mode that reduces the close focusing distance to 0.70 meters, but you are also limited to a maximum of f2.8. Definitely useful for wedding close-up details. The only criticism here is that the resistance when turning the lens is quite high. I even slipped off the lens due to the round character of the focus tab. It also feels and sounds drier when turning, compared to other lenses. Perhaps this will improve with years of use and it's not a significant limitation to usability. Due to the lens construction, there is no back button autofocus. Matching the overperforming lens, we have one of the best sensors currently available, the 60 megapixel full frame sensor, likely also found in the Sony a7R5. In DxO, the M11 ranks third and it shares the same sensor. Just look at this image. Impressive, right? Let me show you how much I've cropped the image. That's the real power of the lens combined with the sensor. Of course, with a fixed focal length camera like the Q, there are advantages when using the 35mm crop. You still have a whopping 40 megapixels. At 50mm it's 80 megapixels, at 75 it's 8 megapixels and at 90 it's 6 megapixels. So even if you want a 35mm lens, you can easily use the Q3 even at 50mm. The loss is manageable. Therefore, You not only have a 28 Summicron but also a 35 and a 50mm, all in one. But all the scrubbing power is worthless if you don't have a good camera body to go in it. The design is one of the major highlights and deserves an absolute chest kiss. Here it's not too much, and thankfully it doesn't conform to the hyper-functional design of all other manufacturers. I generally find it sad that there's almost this only one camera body type available. Other body shapes are beautiful too. I believe Leica has created a modern classic with a Q, which can only get better from here. The size is wonderfully small and, most important, inconspicuous. You won't find a 60 megapixel camera plus lens that surpasses this size. As one would expect from Leica, the build quality is top notch. Leica excels at selecting the right feeling buttons and switches. Just listen. And that's it what makes a Leica enjoyable. Nothing wobbles or has too much play, in contrast to the M11 where at least my D-pad rattles. No, it's not broken, that's how it's supposed to be, according to Leica's repair service. By the way, if you want to hear my thoughts about the Leica M11, I've made a full video about it here on the channel. The coating is very good, but it has not the luxurious feeling as the one of the M11. But I think it suits the Q3 better. I really love the rhombus pattern of the fake letter in the front. And I wish the M11 had such a pattern. The buttons have been rearranged due to the flip-out display. Two of them are now in the position covered by the thumb support, which is a somewhat odd decision. However, Leica offers a new thumb support that takes it into account. So you can toss your €270 thumb support of the Q1 or Q2 in the trash. I will now point out a few things that I don't find quite satisfactory. If you don't want to hear this, feel free to skip to the next part. There are some things that I would like to see improved, even if they might be not as important. The entire camera feels quite hollow, almost like a sheet metal lunchbox compared to the dense lens. Unfortunately, this makes the camera feels cheaper than it is. Even an XH2 or XT5 feels denser. The issue that arises from this, that it's front heavy, but hey, Leica has a solution for this. Of course, one can be solved with money. An optional grip that screws under the Q3. Granted, it's cool as it also supports wireless charging. Another issue with the body is that it's relatively smooth due to the coating. And the thumb groove only provides little grip. But hey, you can also buy an additional thumb support, which is of course appropriately Leica priced. Additionally, there are small things like the labeling on the shutter speed dial, which is only printed on instead of being engraved. I mean, the lens is engraved, and they even managed to engrave the A on the shutter speed dial, but I don't know why they couldn't engrave the rest. I mean, are these cost-saving measures or what? The finish on the battery compartment doesn't match the coating in the rest of the camera. It almost looks like the battery cover is made of plastic. I'm also not sure if I like the new flap on the side. Considering that the SD card slot on the bottom feels so good so open, the side flaps seem unnecessary. The flap was firmer in the beginning than it's now after more frequent use. But hey, you can't change everything because there has always to be room for improvement for Q4. The EVF is fantastic. It's the best I've seen so far. The magnification is enormous, significantly larger than the one of the XT5 for example. Colors are presented really beautiful and true to nature, at least in nature mode. Net mode? Yeah. Almost 6 million pixels are at play here, which is almost twice as much in, for example, the XT5. Only an optical viewfinder is better. What I unfortunately realized too late is that the viewfinder also supports 120 Hz. However, my eyes are not sensitive enough to see the difference between 60 and 120. In the Q3, the leaf shutter is back in action. The advantage here is that it's really quiet and practically inaudible on the streets, making it perfect for street photography. By the way, this is now how it sounds. Not the most satisfying shutter noise, but I think it's okay. The problem is that it only gets a maximum shutter speed of 2000. So forget about shooting at f1.7 in broad daylight. There is also an electronic shutter, but it's also a piece of garbage. So the rolling shutter is so massive you can't use it in any fast-paced situations. Unfortunately, there is also no built-in ND filter like the X100R or a more modern central shutter like the XCD28P lens from Hasselblad, which supports 1/4000th of a second. The flip display is probably the biggest point of argument between cube purists and people with at least one bad knee. I can totally understand that a flat display that goes flush into the body is aesthetically better. But I think Leica has executed this flip display quite well. Simply because the display is also so tight and robustly built. Nothing wobbles and there are no gaps. That's how you build a flip display. It saves you from crawling onto the ground a few times and allows you to quickly take a shot you might not have had otherwise. Personally, I thought I would use it more. But having gotten used to not having one with the M11, I used it less frequently. Unfortunately, I managed to scratch the paint a bit, even though I don't know how. So don't carry the camera with flipped out screen. The built-in display is 3 inches in size and boasts a bright 1.8 million pixels, which is on par with the X-T5. Leica has finally caught up with the other manufacturers and packed a 2200 mAh battery into the Q3. That's a whopping 400 more than the old battery could. The battery of course comes with a lever function that all Leica cameras should have by now. I shot a 3-hour wedding and took 1400 pictures and still had a quarter of the battery left. So you will need several batteries for a whole day. But I will tell you a secret, that there is another luxury manufacturers with the big H that not only built a prettier variant that's almost the same size, but also managed to pack a whopping 3400 mAh into it. I'm not a battery technician, but the only reason I can think of not putting the maximum into a battery is that you want to sell more of them. Of course, you can also buy more of them and only have to pay a mere 170 euros for a made in China battery. By the way, that 3400 mAh battery from the Hasselblad costs only 95 euros. Hey people, it's 2023 and I can tell you that the Q finally has a USB port. Wow! Fun fact, the first digital camera with a USB port was a Kodak DC40 released in 1995. So it took like a mere 28 years to finally realize that cameras should have USB ports. I mean, I understand that for the M, it might be not as crucial for conceptual reasons, but for a modern interpretation of the M like the Q, it should have been there from the beginning. In addition to the USB-C port, there is also a mini HDMI port. And that's it. Well, a jack for audio recording would have also been nice, but well, for 6000 euros, I think you take what you can get. The software is always Leica's biggest Achilles heel. Naturally, for a relatively small manufacturer like Leica, it's more challenging to build a stable system that can compete with major players. So let's take a closer look at the fantastic features and issues the camera has. And if it's a software disaster like the M11. The autofocus on the Q3 has undergone a significant update from the contrast detect to phase detect autofocus. And I can tell you that it's finally reached Sony alpha level. All pictures I took with the focus field were focused exactly where I wanted at a reasonable speed. I also shot a freshen session with the eye autofocus and AFC. And even in challenging situations like jumps or turns, hardly any picture was out of focus. The only point where the object and eye autofocus struggle is when something obstruct partially covers the object, then it has a bit of a stroke. My only gripe is that to focus the OIS vibrates. The image briefly is like a bunch of unidentified pixel mush. This happens every time in AFS. You get used to it, but it's annoying AF. Oh man, you're a tough audience. The zone and full frame autofocus is precise and fast enough even for street photography. The odd decision to include many plus symbols in the zone is really strange. You can't see what you are focusing on. A border would have been much better. Overall, I'm very satisfied with the Q3's performance. And I can really tell you that it's much better than what Fuji can perform. But Sony's and Canon's still have the focusing crown. But I can tell you it should be more than sufficient for all genres. In the exposure, I can give you a sign of relief. Unlike the M11, the first shot after turning the camera on is correctly exposed. All exposure modes work flawlessly and do what they are supposed to do. Not a single picture was too bright or too dark during my time with the camera. White balance is okay. The deviation between shots are usually significant, even in constant light. You might prefer to use it in a fixed Kelvin value or one of the predefined settings. Otherwise, I find the automatically chosen white point way too blue. Unfortunately, unlike my Fuji, you can't shift the white point yourself. That's a bit of a shame. It would have paired well with the new Leica looks added to the Q3. Now let's talk about the new Leica looks. I primarily tried the Leica Classic and Leica Contemporary, comparing with the natural profile. Generally, I find them quite good as they increase brightness, which I personally like. The colors are naturally interpreted differently. You download individual presets with the Leica Photos app. I actually like this better than Fuji, because it allows you to control which presets you want to have, preventing an overcrowded list. I assume many new ones will be added over time. I would really wish they would make artist-specific presets, like an Alan Scheller black and white profile or a William Eggleston color profile. And if that ever happens, you heard it here first, okay? I think JPEG shooters will especially have a lot of fun with this camera. I really like the UI. Everything is well labeled and well organized. Everything is where you would expect it to be. By the way, the UI is so different from the M11 that it's definitely not the same codebase, but only a menu skin. Startup time and responsiveness. Here unfortunately it gets a bit uncomfortable again. Startup time is in the range of the Leica M11, not the fastest camera, but fast enough that you shouldn't miss anything. Responsiveness is all over the place. Sometimes everything goes super fast, sometimes it completely hangs. And you wait for 5 seconds until it continues. This happens mainly when you want to view your photos. However, there have been no freezes requiring battery removal. Otherwise, the menus themselves are quick and don't feel sluggish or hang. And with Leica, if the camera freezes, bring it back, demand a replacement because it's probably broken like my M11. Why I'm mentioning that the Q3 has a touchscreen when the Leica Q2 has also one? I bring it up because with touchscreen you can control the focus points by simply tapping anywhere on the screen. And this feature drove me almost insane. You look through the viewfinder only to realize that the focus point has once again jumped to the edge just because you somehow touched the screen with the freaking edge of your thumb. This became such an issue at a wedding that I completely avoided using the EVF because I kept shifting the focus points constantly. Freaking annoying. I searched the internet and I found out that in the menu this can't be changed. There is also a great feature where you can swipe from left to right on the touchscreen to activate the video mode. I struggled with this feature as well and missed a few shots. Because no, you can't turn it off. Dear Leica software team, it's great that you incorporate features, but please make sure that for every built-in function there should always be a switch in the menu to disable that function. I believe no one here buys a Q3 mainly for its video features. However, Leica has taken everything Lumix has done in the recent years and put it into the Q3. Unfortunately, they also forget to include a headphone jack. so the camera is more likely to be relegated to a B-roll camera. While you could record everything in an external recorder, it's usually cumbersome. Nevertheless, I've made some sample recordings for you in the L-Log. The autofocus works but felt more sluggish and slower than in the photo mode. All in all, no one should underestimate this camera. For more video information you should watch YouTubers that are more video centric than I am. So, who should buy this camera? The camera has a few flaws and incredible strengths. The 28mm lens might be a deal breaker, but if you want an absolutely high quality Leica that won't break the bank too much, I can absolutely recommend it. Where the Q3 truly shines is in street photography, whether in manual or autofocus mode. The camera is a powerhouse for professional street photographers, a clear recommendation. However, if you are transitioning from an analog M, I would suggest trying it out first, as the cameras are quite different. You might be disappointed. If the rangefinder has always put you off or you think you are too slow for it, then the Q is just right. As an everyday carry, it's even a bit too large for me. In that case, I would recommend looking for a Ricoh GR3. Something you can still always have in your pocket. The X100V would be also a better everyday carry, if you can find one of course. For weddings, as a second camera for wide shots, it is more than suitable. Maybe as a companion for an M11 with a 50mm lens. That way you don't have to buy two overly expensive M11s and two focal lengths. As a primary portrait lens, the Q3 is not as suitable. While you can work well with the 28mm, you quickly reach its limits. However, you don't have to forget there are still the original Q and the Q2, because they have the same lenses, so if the Q3 is financially out of reach, there's your alternative. Yeah, video's over I guess. If you liked it, then please like, share and subscribe. If you have questions, then do it in the comments down below. Until next time, take care, bye.
Ich filme.
Ja, warte, ist das vom Framing ganz gut, oder?
Ist gut.
Gut, dann gehe ich nochmal raus.
Auf Wiedersehen.